We're going to talk about something called open science, why we need open science. So in the spirit of open science, the slides are also open. So you can go on the link and download, or you can scan this in order to have this on your phone.
Okay.
And the reason why this is important is because there's lots of hidden slides. And we only have about an hour, and there's 150 slides. So we will not do 150, but if you want to know more about this, then download this. Share this with whoever you want, and then go over both the presented slides and the hidden slides for more information. So there's a lot of information that I will not go over, and also a lot of slides with links that I don't have the time to explain everything. So if you want more information, you can always go and have a look. My name is Gilad. Everybody in Hong Kong calls me Philly. Now my base is Hong Kong, and typically second semester I go around the world to meet people from different countries. So also here an opportunity, which is very exciting for me. This is my first day ever in Argentina, spend together with you. I don't believe in hierarchy. So professors or teachers, researchers and students, I don't understand why there's like a ladder. We're all together. So don't feel afraid to contact me. It's completely okay. I want to hear from you. If you want, in the spirit of open science, I make all my talks available. Hopefully this one as well is recorded, and we'll share this afterwards. If you want to hear more about this, go and have a look at this. The first talk ever I gave in Brazil 2 years ago, thinking that I can come to Argentina after that, but COVID happened. So I'm now living the plan that I had 2 years ago. So one of the very few good things that came out of COVID is forced me to record everything. So some of these is Zoom, but now everything is documented on YouTube. I want to start by talking about a paradox. So something that doesn't make a lot of sense. And this is a paradox that I live every day. And the paradox is between the part of the study that should be beyond our control. So as a researcher, when I study reality, the one thing that I don't want to affect is reality. I am an observer. I want to document reality. But the problem is that when I, as a researcher, when I'm being evaluated, the way that people evaluate me as a researcher is by producing results. So the things that are most important for me in my career, the way that I get publications, the way that I get funding, the way that I get promotion, is by producing as many publications as possible based on amazing results. So on one side, I should not touch reality. I should not affect the results. On the other side, I'm supposed to make the results and my publication amazing. So don't touch the results, but make sure that the results are amazing. How am I supposed to live in this kind of environment? What should I do in order to live in this kind of paradox? And there's a paradox that conflicts between what is best for science, and what is best for science is for me as a scientist to just look at the outcome without affecting it. But for me as a scientist, I have to produce the great results. I have to show that something worked. If I don't show p-value lower than 0.05, it won't get published. But it's not only that, there's another paradox. And the paradox is how do we assess whether research is credible or not? Let's say that somebody tells you something about COVID, about pandemic. How do you know that this is reliable or not? You go and you look at the research, you look at the data, you look at the code, you evaluate everything about the process. You know, did they do the trials for the vaccination? Did they do everything correctly? And then you assess the credibility. But for me as a researcher, or for me as a pharmaceutical company, or for me as somebody who is engaging in science, what the researchers, the incentives for me is to share as little as possible. Because maybe then you'll see that data is messy, reality is messy, maybe not everything worked, maybe you'll find some mistakes. I don't want you to find my mistakes. So on one side, for society, we want to know everything about all the COVID vaccines, all the COVID treatments, everything. We want to know what has been done, and in order to know what has been done, we need to make everything transparent and open. But for me as a scientist, I don't want to share anything. I need to share as little as possible. I don't want you to take my work, build on my credit. I spend a lot of time researching this, so I don't want to share this with you. I need to promote my own career. A conflict. Another conflict is about how do we assess credibility by transparency, rigor, assessment. So we look at each and every step of the way. But what researchers are motivated to do is we never go back and look at somebody's work. Nobody's conducting replications. Nobody's conducting assessments. Everybody is just producing new all the time. Let's do more novel. Who is going to check? Who is going to revisit? If I revisit something, if I do a replication, can I really publish this? The answer is no. So there's another inherent paradox that on one side, what is good for science and society is not what is good for the scientists. And this is an issue that we have to solve. And if you look at the research life cycle of how we do research, how we do science, we have all the circle of we generate hypotheses. So we have a research question. We want to know, we have to make a prediction. We want to see whether we can predict the outcome, the future. And then we design a study that is supposed to match with the research hypothesis. Then we collect the data. Then we analyze the data and we test the hypothesis. Then we interpret the data. And then we publish this, or we conduct again and again. This is my life, basically, in one circle where I go through this circle again and again. But because of all these problems, we have a problem in each and every step. So for example, we don't really replicate anything that we found before. When we design a study, we don't make sure that the study is well powered. There's all sorts of problems. For example, especially in neuroscience, especially developmental studies, especially cancer, we don't have a lot of participants. To put every participant in a scanner takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. So we have samples of 20, used to be that we had samples of 10, so very low power. In collecting data, selective reporting, so we only report what worked. We don't tell what didn't work. So it could be we had 100 studies of a vaccine working or not working. Only 2 studies show that the vaccine is working. 98 show that it didn't work. I just take the 98, put this in the drawer, and I only show you the 2 that worked. Selective reporting. This is a big problem. We want to know all the 100, not only the 2 out of the 100 that worked, right? The way that we interpret the data, we look at the data, and the data is not exactly what I hypothesized. It wasn't my prediction. What do? I can't publish this way. So I go back and I say, oh, my prediction, what I meant to say is actually what I saw. And then I rewrite the whole paper to say that I predicted what I saw. And this is a big problem about changing the hypothesis. And now we have data for this. So only 1 in 1,000 papers has ever seen a replication. Low statistical power. We have a very, very small samples that we can make use of. I'm going to talk about this. Selective reporting is one of many practices that we call questionable research practices. These are things that bias our understanding of reality. So we can't understand reality if we have this selective reporting, and then we don't have data sharing. So we can't evaluate anything. And we now know that actually we've been doing a very bad job at this, because some indicators, 92% of our literature is p-value lower than 0.05. Reality cannot be that everything is positive. What happened to all the things that are not positive? Where are they? In some person's file drawer. So we're hiding this. So this is a big, big problem. And this is caused because results driven, because of competition. I compete against you. It's either me or you, not me together with you. And everything is about novelty, new. We don't go back to look again and again. And then things go very, very badly. And I'll show you how bad they go. So my question generally is, can we get back on track? Can we get science to work the way that science should work? And I'll give you an example of just how big these questions are, these problems are. And these questions are the most urgent for me as a scientist. So I'm supposed to be a psychologist, a social psychologist. I do social psychology, but in the years since my postdoc. So this is 2018, my 4th year, 5th year of an assistant professor, tenure track in academia. I decided I'm going to put what I'm doing aside to focus on these big issues. This came out not too long ago. So we're talking about published in December 2021. This is an earthquake in science, because before that, we had a problem in some places in psychology. So me and some other people, we failed to replicate some of the classic studies, but the hard sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, told us, oh, of course, psychology doesn't replicate. It's a weak science. It's not really a science. No problem. But if we go to biology, everything is going to work out terrific. But this is cancer biology. This is about cancer. If this doesn't replicate and they don't do well, people suffer. People die. So what did they do over here? They decided to replicate, to rerun again, because we've never rerun studies in biology. Rerun again 193 experiments to see, are we going to get exactly the same findings or not? Problem was, you can't do a replication of 193 studies because out of those, a lot of the information is not available. How did they run the studies? What was the protocol? What things did they actually do? It's not written in the paper. So when you read papers as students, as faculty, we go to the method section. Can you really understand what they did from the method section? Very rarely. In psychology, it's difficult. In biology, nearly impossible. So out of 193, they only were able to start with 50. And it's not for lack of trying. They actually contacted the original authors and said, can you please explain to us what you did over here? And the original author is like, this was a long time ago. We don't remember. We changed universities, the email account, lost my laptop, all sorts of things. This is what happened. So this is a Twitter summary, screen captures from a summary of what happened. 2013, so a decade ago, they said, let's do a replication in biology to make sure everything is okay. But 2018, oh, sorry, we can only start with very few of them. And then at the end, what happened is that full replication, 5 out of 18, which means 5 out of 50, which means 5 out of 193 that they started from. This is a successful replication. So they started from how many can we fully replicate, and only 5 out of this 193 were they able to successfully replicate. So this is horrible. This is not what science is supposed to be, because we want to know if we treat a patient that has cancer, that we're able to do this well. 7, partial replication, and the other ones are can't interpret this, can reproduce this. So this is a big problem, and actually this is worse than psychology. I'm going to talk about psychology in a second, but this is an earthquake for science. We should be talking about this more, but we don't talk to our students about this. Even University of Hong Kong, I'm the only professor who is actually communicating this to students and to the public. Some people say, if we say this to the students, they will never believe science. If we say to the public, this is what's happening. But what makes science science is that we can learn and improve. We don't hide our mistakes. We show our weaknesses and we aim to make them better. And the question is, how do we make this better? What is going on here? And this is not just cancer biology. We don't have a lot of data because we haven't been doing replications, but in the little that we've been doing in the hard sciences, we see that there's big issues. One of them is neuroscience. So the department here does a lot of neuroscience. At University of Hong Kong, a lot of my colleagues are neuroscientists, and the replication rate for the one study that they did here is about 6%. And this is especially because the samples are so small. The methods are very noisy. It goes up and down in each direction. The errors are just like all over the place. If you get 3 people to look at the same brain scan, you're going to get different interpretations of what is going on over there. So a lot more messy than the kind of stuff that I usually deal with. So we can see, starting from 2011, 2012, we had first indications of a company wanted to see how reliable academic research is. and getting like 1.2%, 11%. So this is not where we want science to be. This is a big problem for us. But it's not just cancer biology. It's not just psychology. All these headlines started to come out from 2015. And you can see medicine, the sciences stopped working, chemical research, economics. This is about the cancer biology I just talked about. And then people said, no, but if you go closer to math, then math, that's science. But then more recently, this is August 2020, also empirical computer science. You would expect computer science to be better, or quantum mechanics, quantum computation also have an issue with this because we don't share. We're not open. So people do all kinds of things. Maybe they did a mistake. Maybe it just works in that specific context. We've never tried again and again to do this with independent, and we're not open on what it is that we do. How do we know that we have a problem? We have two ways of knowing. One is something called a meta-science. So we've never really evaluated using scientific methods how we do science. We want to know using scientific methods if our science is working or not. We should evaluate ourselves all the time. So this is a new direction in science called meta-science, and it got some amazing findings. Second thing is we ask researchers, can you please tell us what you're doing in research? And some of the replies that we get from them are just mind-blowing. And I'm going to share a little bit of both of them. I'll start with meta-science. So this is an evaluation of indicators in reproducibility and transparency. This is cardiology. So we're not talking neuroscience or psychology, talking about something that's supposed to be a hard science. The majority of publications did not provide access to complete data sets. So we're talking about 96% of them don't share anything about what it is that they do. And the problem here, it's especially mind-blowing because you are our customers. Your taxes pay for my salary and my funding. You should want me to share this back with you. I've used your money in order to conduct research. I owe it to you as my customers, as my stakeholders, to share everything that's available. 96% don't share anything. And then about all the scripts fail to provide step-by-step analysis, 98%. Is that science? This is a trust system. We don't need a trust system. We need something science. We need to be able to evaluate this. And it goes further. This is low availability of code in ecology. Even if we have the data sets, what does it mean? A lot of columns, numbers. How do I make sense of this? We also need the code. I want to see what the researchers did, but there's no code. Even if there's a data set, there's no code. How can we make sense of this? How can we evaluate this? Very big problem over here. Data sharing, code sharing, even disclosing things like conflicts of interest. You can see the rates over here about data sharing. It's not even increasing, it's somewhere close to zero. So we want science to be a real science. And then Ioannidis is one of the our most prolific scientists, thousands of publications. And he's the first one who in 2005 had a very big title. Paper said why most research published findings are false. And since then, he's been using meta-science to show us some of the problems. And here he's talking about zombie randomized trials. So people are researching all kinds of things. They're going on a public website to register all kinds of clinical trials, but some of them have nothing underneath. They're zombie. So he's identified a very alarming rates of 44 were deemed to be false. 26 were deemed to be zombies. But we never evaluate this. We never go, if somebody says, okay, I ran a randomized control trial. We're like, oh yes, terrific, tested. We never go and search on what it is that actually did. And when we do, it's very alarming, which is why we're moving towards understanding the conflict between the incentives and the researchers. And we need to address this. Very few papers, this is one of the few that I was able to find, talking about the conflicts and the paradox. And we need to talk about this more. What are the researchers telling us? So this was meta-science. But when we ask researchers, can you please tell us what is it that you're doing in science? How are you doing science? Actually, this came out from the Netherlands. So we were talking about the Netherlands before, as experiencing some fraud cases. So they wanted to know, is there still fraud? So they had some 3, 4, 5 fraud cases in 2011. They really tried to clean up their act, change their practices. So this is the year 2020, so a decade later. What's happening? Prevalence of fabrication and falsification were 4.3 and 4.2. And this is people where we ask them, are you falsifying data? And people are self-reporting falsifying data. And actually, if people are self-reporting to do this, can you imagine what the real rate is? Respectively, 51.3% of respondents engage frequently in at least one questionable research practices. Questionable research practices is sometimes called p-hacking, where, for example, we collected 100 variables, but we only report the 2 that worked. Or we had 100 trials, and you only report the 2 that worked. Or we're trying for all kinds of things, adding covariates, doing all kinds of optional stopping in order to get the p-value lower than 0.05, just so that we can publish the paper. So 51.3%, a decade after all the fraud cases, are still doing these questionable research practices in the Netherlands, which is considered one of the most ethical and open places in the world right now. All sorts of other things coming out of psychology. So the role of human vulnerability in psychological research, mistakes. How many people admit to having mistakes over there? So everything from I don't do version control very well or data coding errors. People are just self-reporting that they have issues in the way that they code the data. They are mistakes. So first of all, people are making fraud. Second of all, they're playing around with the statistics. And third of all, they're making mistakes. So we have all these things reported by people. How about psychology or social psychology? I'm supposed to be a social psychologist. So we had mass collaborations. ML1 is many labs one, where a lot of labs from around the world try to replicate classic findings in social psychology. Many labs 1, many labs 2, many labs 3, there's many labs 4. This is the Open Science Collaboration Science paper. Perhaps some of you have read this, about 100 replications attempted by a collaboration of psychology. Here, they try to replicate 21 papers that were published in Nature and in Science. These are our top journals. How many are being successfully replicated? And the problem is that throughout all of these, the replication rate, and these are our top journals, these are the best of psychology or social psychology. The replication rate is about 90 out of 190. And in the ones that replicate, the effect size, the impact, is about half of what was originally published. So I don't know how you consider this. It's a little bit better than cancer biology, but it's still a very alarming rate. And these are the best of the best in our field. This is my summary, 30 of 50% success rate in social psychology. And in the things that do work, it's about half of their original. When I present this, I get a lot of pushback. And the pushback is especially from senior researchers who have been doing this for many, many years. They're saying that, everything is debatable. They're not sure if there's a crisis. How do I know? Planes are flying, electricity is working. So how come? How can it be? There are treatments, pandemic, vaccinations. So if you're arguing that there's so many problems in science, why? First of all, show us the evidence. Second of all, why change something that is working? And we don't even know if there's a crisis or not. So my reaction to all of this is I am convinced that at the very least, we need to understand things better. We need to do meta-science. We need to understand how we're doing science. And we need to reassess and to find a way to improve. And the kind of reactions that I get remind me a little bit about the climate change discussion, where we're talking about things like green jobs, livable cities, clean air, clean water, and then somebody comes up and says, but what if it's all a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? And for me, it's the same with open science. I'm talking about things like, let's improve our research practices, let's share, let's prevent p-hacking, let's increase the transparency. And then somebody comes up and says, but what if this is all a big hoax and we create a better science for nothing? And for me, the message to you is like, you're the future. So let's create a better science. Regardless of whether you agree with me that there's a crisis here or not, I believe that we can do that. better as a scientist. The main purpose of this talk after this kind of introduction is for me to introduce to you what I believe is the future of science. I really hope that in a decade or two, when you finish your undergraduate or your careers, and then you embark, let's say that you want to be a scientist, or you work in the industry and you rely on science, I hope that this is what you will implement. And for me, this is a reform that we need to do. There's a 3-hour version of this. So if you want to know more about registered reports, I demonstrate how to do this. I take you step by step with a demonstration. So there's a whole talk about this. It started actually from neuroscience in Cortex by a guy called Chris Chambers, who was just amazed that this is not the way that science works. And he came out with this editorial in Cortex in 2013. He was invited to be an editor in that journal. And he said, the only way I'm going to be an editor is if you let me try something new. Rather than you submitting to me what you've already done, completed, wrote up, what I'm asking you to do is change the way that you're doing things. So the editor of Cortex allowed Chris Chambers to do this. And now it's a new direction in science. And basically, what is happening in science in general is you develop the idea, you study design, you collect the data, you write the report, and only then you submit this to peer review. And then if reviewers don't like your outcome, if the p-value is not lower than 0.05, if it's not novel and exciting and amazing, then they just say reject. We don't need this anymore. And then you try a different journal, and then you give up and you put this in the file drawer and then it's gone. This is why we don't have null findings, we don't have p-value higher than 0.05, and we don't have anything that is boring like replications, like assessments. So this is a broken system. We've seen all the problems and the indications for that. But Chris Chambers said, registered reports, different model. We don't see the outcomes. You make a plan, you submit the plan to the journal, and then together with the reviewers, we discuss whether the plan is good enough or not, rigorous or not. And then after we evaluate, do you have well-powered samples? Are your hypotheses well-founded and related to the theory? Is the proposed analysis, are they feasible and related to the hypothesis? So together with the editor and the reviewers, you work as a community in order to reach the best way to study a research question. And then after you agree on this, the journal gives you an in-principle acceptance, meaning it doesn't matter what the outcome is. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, as long as you follow the plan and we're completely transparent about this, then they will publish this. So it doesn't matter if the p-value is above or below 0.05. It doesn't matter if it's an exciting outcome or not. Whatever it is, it's going to get published. But the second round of review is only meant in order to check that you followed your plan from the original. So all these things don't matter. It doesn't matter whether the hypotheses were supported or not. It doesn't matter the p-value. It doesn't matter if the results are novel. It doesn't even matter if you have impact or not. Registered reports are supposed to neutralize all of these biases in science. So from this problem of all these biases, we get to a point where suddenly there's no publication bias. There's no systematic inherent biases. We've eliminated all the need for questionable research practices to push the p-value lower than 0.05. You have to share everything, so everything is transparent and open to begin with. So you've addressed all the issues over here. And when I show this to my undergraduate students in my courses, they look at me and says, wait, this is not how science works now? And then I'm like, I'm very sorry. We failed you. We should have built this science to begin with, but we haven't. We built some monster of impact factors and number of publications instead of building what it is that we were supposed to from the beginning. There's lots of historical reasons for that, but this is what the situation is. So it started from Cortex. Chris Chambers has been working tirelessly, and it grows and grows, and now it's in over 300 journals, not just in psychology, but across the field. Whatever field you're in, there's now a place that would do register reports. This is the hierarchy of evidence. So let's say that you go to industry. Let's say that you finish your studies and you see a study on COVID or on cancer or on something related to your field, and you want to know, is this credible or not credible? I really like this hierarchy because the way that I see it, status quo research right now, the research that we're doing right now, to me, barely worth a mention. If I see one study that claims something, to me, this is not enough. I want to see a body of evidence with independent replications. I want to see everything open and shared. I want to see if I can assess this or not. So if we go one level up and it has data and materials, that's a little bit better. So when we're looking at vaccinations, for example, we force the companies to be more transparent, to have independent external consultants in order to evaluate whether the registrations worked or not. Confirmatory also says a pre-registration. So pre-registration that you had a plan and you publicly put this in a place where everybody can see that you followed that plan before you started to collect the data. Register reports is what Chris Chambers is offering. This is already a much higher level of evidence. So when I see a register report, I'm like, I trust this a lot more than I do anything that's right now in the literature. So one of the things that I do with my team, with my students, with other people from around the world in the open science community, we do registered report replications of what is in the literature. Before I do a registered report replication, I'm not really sure in my textbook of social psychology what to communicate to the students. Only when I've replicated this with a registered report, now I have more confidence. But I added, this is Chris Chambers, I added something more. So Chris Chambers says, in a decade, the best evidence that we have is the meta-analysis of registered reports. And I completely agree. This is much higher evidence than what we have right now. A meta-analysis is you take all of the studies together and you aggregate this in order to say, of all the 100 studies, this is our conclusion. I also think that a meta-analysis needs to be a registered report. So with me and the team, we work together in order to have a template and a standard for how to do registered reports for meta-analysis. So lots of things for why this is important and good for science. So transparency, credibility, reproducibility. But then some scientists, especially early career researchers, they come to me and say, come on, but the science system is different. We want to get promoted, we want to get into a PhD, we want to find a postdoc, we want to get hired, we want to get promoted. I'm an assistant professor, in 2 years I need to face a tenure committee and they will evaluate whether I've done well or not. If I start doing only registered reports, am I going to be competitive enough? And the answer is yes. There are also benefits for you as the author, as the students, as the researchers. Why? First of all, instead of the experts, the reviewers, saying bad, 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 and rejecting you, there's no reason to reject you in a registered report because you submit the plan. If they have criticism, terrific, thank you, you change, you update the plan. So rather than working against them, you're working together with them. Sometimes I really feel like I want to give them authorship because they've helped me so much. So at least I acknowledge them. And maybe we will move towards collaboration where all the community works together. Also, the acceptance rate. There's no reason for the journal to reject you because everything can be changed at the plan. So Chris Chambers in Cortex, if you care about Cortex, which is a high impact journal in neuroscience, move from 90% rejection rate to less than 10% rejection rate. So suddenly you don't need to try this journal and then this journal. And the first one that you submit to is the one that you get published in. Plus, when you have in-principle acceptance, before you collect the data, it's much easier to go to your funding agency and say, I already have a publication. Now it's time for you to fund this. Or if you don't have a funding agency or don't have ways to collect data, you go on Twitter, like me, and say, who wants to be my co-author? I already have in-principle acceptance. So suddenly it's much easier to collect data and find collaborators and do a project because the journal has already told you that they approved your plan. So all of this, plus at the end, it's better cited, it gets a lot more attention, and it is considered to be more credible. I tried to get from Twitter all kinds of responses to this. So this is some reactions to registered reports. So for example, Bobby Spellman, she used to be the editor, I think, of Perspectives, like one of our most, or psychological, like one of the most prestigious journals. And I love this. It reminds me of why we are in science. So I've been asked many times to review, but then suddenly, as a reviewer, I love register reports because rather than just seeing all the flaws, now I can contribute. Reviewing first stage one is great to give feedback that can be acted on. So finally, somebody can do something with that. And it's not like the data has been collected. What can you do? It's like actually, this can be changed. I'm not going to show you the demonstration, but these are two students, undergraduate students, who are doing a thesis with me. And the way that they're doing their thesis with me is that we submitted their thesis to the journal. So before we do the data collection, we submit this to Chris Chambers, to the journal. I will talk about which journal that is, and we get feedback. So they've improved their undergraduate thesis, and now both of them have an in-principle acceptance. So on their CVs, they already have in-principle acceptance for my undergraduate thesis. If you want to see how they do this, just go and click on this and have a look, because they've done amazing work. Not only can you see the work that they've done, but because this is open science, you can see the kind of reviews that they got from the journal and how they improved each and every step. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about community effort, working together with the journalists, working together with the reviewers, even when you're just an undergraduate. So undergraduates can do amazing science work that gets accepted to the journals and can be improved on. All of the thesis students working with me, so I have 4 undergraduates and 5 taught master's students, all of them are doing registered reports as their thesis within a one academic year schedule. Do we have evidence that registered reports are working? We do. I'm not going to go into this, but when we don't do registered reports, something weird is happening. And when we plot this, it's like, what is going on over here? This is clear indication of publication bias. But when we do registered reports, suddenly everything falls into place and we live in harmony and it looks like reality. The problem is when we don't do registered reports, it looks like there's an effect. So it says over there, G equals 0.35. But when we do registered reports, the effect goes down to almost 0. So we can see clear differences and we can evaluate this scientifically to see that registered reports have effect. What other effects do they have? From 92% positive findings, which is completely impossible, when we do registered reports, some things worked, some things don't work. But we don't have a bias because whatever happens, it gets published. And we need to know when something doesn't work. We need to know if a vaccination doesn't work. We need to know if a cancer treatment doesn't work. And registered reports gets you closer to the truth. You see this also in medicine, stops p-hacking and all sorts of things. So before they started doing pre-registrations in medicine, treatment works, and then finally after they started doing pre-registrations, everything is close to 0. So we need to know this kind of thing. Plus, this is a randomized controlled trial that they did for registered reports. They gave blinded, so people who evaluated these reports did not know, is this registered reports or not registered reports? And then they evaluated when people assess the quality. So methods rigor, analysis rigor, overall quality of a paper, registered reports seems to be much higher quality in the way that it's written, in the methods, in the results, and so forth. So all of this is meta-scientific evidence. Now, I've done a few registered reports. This is from Krishna Savani, who is a full professor now. He used to be in Singapore, now he's moving to Hong Kong. And he invited me to Singapore to do a workshop on how to conduct a meta-analysis. And I went to work with his students. Now we have 2 meta-analyses that are in principle acceptance registered report. And I asked him for this workshop and other workshops on registered reports, can you please tell me, what's your impression? You've been editing manuscripts for so many years. You've been a researcher for many years. What do you feel about this? And this is what he says. He says, this was the registered reports that I did with him and his students, was by far the most rewarding research experience for him after so many years. And the reason is that there's clarity, there's no second guessing, you know exactly what's happening and everything is transparent. One of the students working with me asked him, can you please help me summarize for others, what is it that you feel? So I won't go into detail, you can look at this afterwards, but he says, this is amazing because registry reports removed all the uncertainty. I didn't need to guess, is it going to be p-value lower than 0.05 or not? Peace of mind, and it saves time because you don't need to submit again and again, you submit this one time. Then all sorts of other things. So he really recommends this to you, to early career researchers, to research postgraduates, to do more of this. He's now on his way to a PhD in Vienna. Still have a bit more time, so I'll try to wrap this up. What we've been moving towards, and this is revolutionary because it started this year, so it's less than a year old. It's called peer community in registry reports. So this is registry reports 2.0. I don't know what 3.0 is going to be, but I'm already very happy with peer community in registry report. Basically, this is summarized from a presentation of somebody of peer community in registry report, PCIRR, non-profit, non-commercial, free, researcher run, not publisher run, super journal platform for conducting journal-style peer reviews of registry reports across all research fields. So not just psychology, not just cortex, all the fields. And what's special about this is that it prevents a lot of the problems that registry reports did not solve. One of the issues is, perhaps you've been talking about this, perhaps you know this as students, is that you as the taxpayers financed me and my research. And then I submitted this to a journal where other researchers who are financed by other taxpayers spend time in order to review my research, hours on hours, sometimes years of investment. And then finally, the journal gives me approval. And then I take everything that I did and I give this for free to a publisher that puts it behind a paywall and asks you money in order to access this. And then we need to find all sorts of ways. So the library needs to pay millions of dollars for you to be able to access this, but then nobody else is able to access this. So this is a big problem. Open access is a part of open science, which is a big problem. Here, this gives you power to the authors. First of all, it's community run. There is no publisher. So everything is run by the community. And then the revolutionary thing over here is once they give you an in-principle acceptance, you choose out of 30 journals, hopefully in the future, hundreds of journals, which journal you want to publish with. It's completely up to you. You're not confined to one specific journal. It emphasizes transparency, it emphasizes all sorts of things. But this was the big revolution for me. And the reason why all my students are doing PCIRR. And the reason is they guarantee peer review within 2 weeks. So the way that this happens, it's this magic thing that happens. And I'm like, how come nobody ever thought about this before? Is that you tell them 6 weeks in advance. In 6 weeks, I'm going to submit. Please prepare. So we work for 6 weeks to prepare our plan. The journal goes to reviewers and says, in 6 weeks, we're going to get this. Who is interested in reviewing this? How do they do this? The magic happens with 1 page. So we write in 1 page a plan to the plan. So we give them a snapshot. They use the snapshot to recruit the reviewers, and the reviewers know to wait for us on this date. And from that date, they have 2 weeks. They give us the review. And suddenly, you don't need to wait for months. You know exactly when you're going to get the review. And I can do this with students during the academic year. Because before that, I didn't know, is it going to get 4 months, 5 months, how many rounds? And here, they really try their best to do everything within 1 round. Revolution in science, completely changing the way that we do things. And now we can involve you, can involve students, can involve people doing this as part of a thesis. Right now, there are about 30 journals that do this, friendly or interested. It's increasing. But the nice thing about these journals is that all of them are very high transparency and open science. So if they're on this list, they care about transparency. So when I see papers published through this in those journals, I trust those more. And I can see those, I can assess those, I can see the evidence for myself. So if you want, you can read more about this here. I'll just tell you about my team, and then I'm going to wrap this up. I work with students and with early career researchers from around the world. I take what I do with my students in my classes, and then I invite people from all over the world, including Argentina. We have last 2 years ago, I was in Brazil, got stuck before the COVID happened. And we recruited people in Brazil, and they're part of our team. And you can see this. So we have people from all over the world. Unfortunately, there's no representation for Africa, but hopefully that will change when I get there. So you can see all these early career researchers are part of this. These are my guided thesis students, and about 370 students in my classes who do real science projects. They write register reports as part of their undergraduate training. So far, in 4 years that I've been a professor, assistant professor, we've conducted 80 pre-registered replications, and we wrote about 40 registered replication reports. And the nice thing about this, and now I can show this to my university, is that we publish these. So students who come to my classes and partake in this are able to publish some of these. I think this is the general process that we have. So we have 2 different teams working independently, and then they peer review each other. And then I go on Twitter and say, who wants to help our students? And then they come in, and we have it. So everything is very elaborate and open, but we are able to do this within 1 semester. And at the end here, you have some amazing register reports written up. And then I invite people, early career researchers from around the world, to come and join what the students did together with me in the semester. These are all the register reports that we're doing right now, in process right now. 2 of them already accepted. The rest, I am sure, within the next month, also going to be accepted, because the peer review is only 2 weeks, so I know that this is coming. And if you want to see the data, the code, the preprint, everything is open. That's the nice thing about open science. So you can click on OSF, 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 and then see those and see what undergraduates like you are doing when we submit these to the journals. So far, we have 15 out of 15. So we submitted all of those, already happened in 2 weeks, and we got an invitation to revise and resubmit. So we already know that this is working. Plus, because of this, I was able to convince my university to fund undergraduates. So I told them, do you want the publications for your undergraduate? I already have an acceptance from the journal. I was like, oh, you have acceptance from the journal? Okay, then we'll fund it. So finally, I have about $1,000 to finance what the students are doing. And to me, I'll say this again, revolution in science, because finally we can include you as a stakeholders in science. You can do some remarkable things. If you want to join us, this is the link. You can go in and have a look to see what it means to join us, what it means to be part of this team, or if you just want to take part in our initiative. You don't even have to do a science project, because the way that we work in the open science community is that even when we do a guide or a template, I don't do all the templates by myself. I do them with my students. I do them with the team. So if you go in and you see something to contribute, it's a Google Doc. You go in, you edit, you put in that this is what you did, and when we submit this to the journal, you're automatically a collaborator. So the way that we work in the open science community is that we make everything open. Anybody from any rank and any experience or expertise can come in and participate, and then we collaboratively submit this to journals and make sure that everything is solid and open. So you can collaborate on our many primers, guides, opinion, manuals, templates. I tried to collect from yesterday. I asked people, can you please tell us how you feel about PCIRR? Very enthusiastic responses. You can go and have a look at this later. People are saying, I feel like this is future of science. This is revolutionary. Not everything works. So for example, I was able to get one person who told me something is off, and then I asked them, can you please share this with me? But the good thing is that even with this, they're communicating with us, and we want to improve this. So they will be able to learn from this and improve. So you have a way of affecting also the process. If you want to know more, these are Chris Chambers giving the talk, or people from PCIRR giving all kinds of videos, not just me. If you want articles about this, this is some articles. Final slide. If you want more information about open science, about meta science, about how to do register reports, how to do meta-analysis, how to work with us collaboratively, there's one link that you need. It's this one, where you can scan this and have a look. Everything is in there. If there's something that you need, you want, and is not there, you can contact me. In general, it doesn't matter what stage of the career you're in. If you have a question, we want to help you. We want to work together with you. This is the spirit of science. We work collaboratively and openly, and we want to include as many people as possible from any place around the world. So a good way is to register for the mailing list to see some of our activities and see which one you want to take part in. You can follow what I'm doing on Twitter. Of course, you can check out my website to see everything about what it is that I communicated. Or if you have a personal question and you want to talk about something specific, then don't hesitate. Don't think, whoever this guy is, he's not going to reply. I will reply. If I'm too busy, I will connect you with somebody else in our team that will reply. So do make use of this. So feel free to join us, to let us know how we can help you in your journey as a student, as faculty, to do open science, meta science, and to just generally do better science. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Something you want to talk about?
Yes.
Yes, please.
For like in the first part, you had you compared biology results with psychology results. My first question saying that is like, where does neuroscience stands in that favor for results? Like, where do we stand? Yeah.
I think one of the issues with neuroscience right now is that we don't know enough, because neuroscience research is very expensive and it takes a long time to do it well. But from the little that we did, the rates for replication in neuroscience are not good. They're not looking good. We want to improve this. So Chris Chambers came from Cortex. He came from neuroscience. He wanted to improve these practices. So in some things, neuroscience seems to care about these things, but we still don't know how good it's doing. And from what we do know, it's not looking very good. So one of the rates that I showed you, for example, from the little that we know, is about 6% replicability. Plus, if you share all the EEGs, fMRI, the scans and all that, it could be terabytes of data. How to share this, how to protect confidentiality, and also lots of issues in neuroscience that are a little bit more complicated than, let's say, social psychology. But there are solutions. I think the biggest challenge, two big challenges that I see. There are other challenges, but two big challenges are: first, the samples are very, very small. The only way to detect p-value lower than 0.05 something, if you have small samples, which means low power, is by having a very big effect. But effects in neuroscience are not big, effect size. So you know what I mean by effect size? So we have two major kinds of error that we try to control: the false positive and the false negative. And together, one is represented by p-value, the other one is represented by power. Power many times is affected by sample size. If you want to control the error for power, you need larger samples, or you need to repeat something many, many times, or you need a design. The problem is that with neuroscience, we have very, very small samples. So I'll give you an example for how we try to overcome this. We have many lab collaborations. For example, one of the biggest revolutions in psychology is something called the Psychological Science Accelerator. So the physicists in Switzerland decided that they don't each have a lot of money, but if they come together, they can build CERN, they can build the accelerator, and then all of them work together with this one accelerator in Switzerland. Psychologists decided we should do the same. You have a neuroscience lab, you can run 40 participants, I can run 50 participants, he can run 30 participants, whatever. Then we can group all of this together. So instead of you having 30, then we can have all together 1,000. And then we can look at this together. So we have bigger power. So we're moving from each person is working on their own to now we work collaboratively, and then we manage the error of power, thereby addressing all sorts of things. So neuroscience has issues, but there are ways that we're now working together in the open science community in order to overcome these issues.
And like with emerging sciences such as neuroscience, which have like very expensive machinery for it, does it make sense to run like projects and hypotheses on such a small sample? Like does it make sense to keep on going without prerequisite applications and all of that? Like, is it better to just take it slower and try to build very slowly all the like the pillars, or just like go faster novelties and then you correct what's like what we've done wrong, because what we're doing now, at least with very small samples and going after big effects and all of that, it seems like we want to go like faster.
Yeah, it's a problem. So I think from my presentation, you know what my answer is going to be. I really think that what we're doing is harmful. It's even worse than not doing anything at all, because we're giving wrong conclusions. And we have this overemphasis on this novelty, or from a very small sample, now we say, oh, we know everything about the brain. When actually we don't, because we need this to be repeated again and again. So we need to change the way that we're evaluating science and conducting science. So I really think that as a neuroscientist, if you go into this field, you need to reevaluate the way that you do, to move to register reports, to move to collaborations that you have large samples, to move into collaborative open science. Because the way that we're doing now things, especially in neuroscience, is not sustainable, and it's causing real harm. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I have like two questions, and one of them, like answers it or goes along with the question.
Yeah.
Like in social sciences and also in neuroscience, we have a lot of like environmental factors that affect like the sample. If we get data from Argentina and try to merge it with data from, Germany or other type of cultures, other type of languages, you might find differences just by the difference in the locations that the patients have been evaluated. So do you think there's a way to go around that issue when we say, like, we can merge sample data from different parts and create a big data set to have a higher power, whereas you might be adding like, error from these types of factors that affect people. And going along with that, I have the question of like, in social sciences.
Hold on, I'll forget what you asked. So let's answer this first.
Yeah.
So I think, regardless of what research you're doing, there might be contextual environmental issues. If you're dealing with the mind or the body, maybe it's not cultural factors, but it could be level of pollution, it could be health, genes, DNA, it could be like a million things. So context of who your participants are and what conditions you're running them in your scanner or in the lab, you need to know what the conditions are. Now, I have less worry about social sciences because we're privileged. Privileged in that, at least in social psychology, I can run very large samples. I send you a Qualtrics link, you send this to others, we collect large samples from around the world, and then I have sufficient power in order to see cultural differences. If we have differences in other kinds of things, it's going to be a lot more complicated to look into this. Now, this is especially important as a reason for why we need open science. If we focused on novelty and every person doing one thing one time and then that's it, something was published in the 1970s using students from Princeton, therefore all of humanity for the following 50 years in everywhere around the world is exactly like that, right? So if you open your psychology textbook, they will tell you because they found this in the 1970s, therefore you in Argentina are also like this 50 years later. Yeah. How do we know? The problem is we don't do replications. Plus, even if we try to look at what they did in the 1970s, we don't know exactly what they did. Now, as an example, the alternative model is what we're doing. So all of these replications that I showed you, everything is open science, open materials, open data, open code. So when I visited Brazil 2 years ago, they looked at this and said, this is great. We also want to do this with the students, but does it work in Brazil? I'm like, I don't know, but take our materials, use as is. Of course, need to translate to Portuguese, but that's already a really nice undergraduate thesis or undergraduate project that you can do. So they took a few of our studies, translated it to Portuguese, and now we have a comparison of what happens when we run this online in the US, what happens when we run this with students in Hong Kong, what happens when we run this in Brazil. So if you make everything available, if you involve the students in transcending this cross-cultural, suddenly you have a lot of samples. And because we want to publish everything, it's not going to be like, oh, you're from Argentina, we don't care because we only like Princeton students' publication. It's like, we value everything. We want to know if this works in Argentina or not, therefore we're going to build on it.
But
So open science is the answer to this kind of thing.
At which point do you know that it's not a problem with the protocol, with methods you're using, but rather with the the data you're using? When do you say, oh, this works because we're using people from Argentina, and it doesn't because it's people from Brazil, and you don't say, oh, this doesn't work because it's a problem of the methodologies we're using, Like,
excellent question, and I don't think that we solved that question. We don't have good answers for that. We try to use aggregation models like a meta-analysis to say we have 5 samples from Hong Kong, we have 10 samples from US, we have 2 from Argentina. Now we run some kind of statistical analysis, and then we see. In the collaborative open science, we're trying to move to a many lab collaboration where Psychological Science Accelerator as a project says, this is our plan, who wants to join? And then 80 labs from around the world run 1,000 participants. Then we can do that kind of analysis. And if we see consistent results around different cultures, and we can control for, let's say, if it comes from South American region, then it happens like this. If it comes from students versus adults, So we can do all this kind of analysis, but you can only do this kind of analysis if you have mass collaborations and replications again and again. And finally, a meta-analysis of all of this. If you just have a one-time study, send it off, and 50 years this holds, do TED Talks, publish books on the 1970s, that's not sustainable. To get to answer that question, we have to move to collaborative open science. Terrific question. This is part of the issues that we have not been thinking about.
And my other question is, like the kind of reports that you showed, like I got from you like that this solves the problem of people taking data or doing everything possible to get a p-value that holds.
Right.
But one could drive that too, like run the whole experiment as he would like to get a good result, and then just grab the part that made him get those results, doing data-driven analysis, and then take that to you and say, hey, look, let's try this, which they already know it works, and just go on and have a paper published with that. I get that it's way more secure.
I agree. No, security is limited. Because whatever lock you're going to find, somebody is going to find a way to overcome it, go around it, all kinds of things. But the nice thing about this is that we're taking away the incentive. Like, there's no reason for you to do this. So why do it? It's so much more work to fabricate this than it is just like run the study. When we work together, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to live with this kind of thing? So you address the core incentive that is built in science, which is completely wrong. You do something that gets everybody involved, but there are always going to be bad players. If you have open science, then at some point, maybe not now, but in 20 years, somebody is going to come up with a statistical method or something, looking at your open data in order to find what it is that you've done. So I think, in the long run, it's just like a bad decision. It's like, why would you want to do that?
There are H-index people who try.
So let's talk about, because this is important. Some people say, why would you share something? If you share something, somebody might see that you made a mistake. For me, it's like, I want you to help me find that error now, not in 20 years when I have H-index of 20, of 30, or whatever. Because then I need to go back to all my TED Talks and my books, and then I need to amend it, and then I need to write a retraction, and then I need to appear in the media, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, how stupid. And all the people that try to follow my work, all the millions of dollars invested because I made a mistake. I want you to help solve this now. So last semester, actually, if you go on my website, there is a section called Check Me, Replicate Me. If you find an error in my research, I will not only say thank you, I will pay you. I pay $5 for a minor mistake and $50 for a major mistake. If you want to make good money, please go over my research and try to help me find this. Because this is small money compared to how much it's going to cost me 20 years, about millions of money invested in all sorts of things, especially, I'm a social psychologist, so not being invested, but if I'm doing like COVID-related stuff, cancer-related stuff, I really want to know now, not in 20 years. So I need your help. We need to help each other in order to find these mistakes. I think you've been looking for an opening. Sorry, I'll come back to you.
My only question is about one of the things that happened when they did a study with the 100 studies on psychology was that from the small margin that they could replicate, the power or the results were like half.
Yeah, the effect size. Yeah.
So this method does help with that problem. Say.
Yeah. So you're saying
because that means that when you manage to do again the test,
it's not as strong.
Rate is half of what was before.
Yes.
So in this method about testing again, facilitating the replication, how many times do we need to replicate the test consecutively? Because I'm not meaning, I don't mean, well, let's leave this paper for 10 years and then replicate it again.
Excellent. So this is such an important question that we don't talk about. Whenever we talk about this, it's a very heated debate with a lot of emotions about this. One of the reasons why I really care about this debate is because there are some findings where we failed to replicate this. So it was published once in 2010 in a very small sample with Princeton students. And then since then, we had many labs from around the world investing millions and failed to replicate this. And then the original authors still say, no, but it's still there. But how do you know that you did better than I did? So when do we decide that something is wrong? Or when do we decide that we need to update our knowledge based on registered reports compared to the original? So this is why it was very important for me to show you this pyramid. Me personally, if something has been published, but no open data, no registered reports, with all due respect to all the big scholars who publish this, I'm skeptical. If I see an attempted replication that is a registered report, everything shared with many labs around the world, I think much higher evidence. But it's a good question of how many times do we need to do this? Do we need 40 labs? Do we need 20 labs? Maybe it's enough to have one lab. When do we decide that we update our knowledge? So the way that I look at this generally is that we have a level of confidence, let's say 0 to 100. If there is an effect or there's no effect. Used to be that they told us this is published in Psychological Bulletin or this is published in Psychological Science. Therefore, move from 0 to 100. Not 100. We need to be a lot more humble. Not 100. We need to, okay, now we know that there's a little bit of evidence, so 10%, right? Let's say that it was 100. And then comes a failed replication or successful replication with half of the effect size. Then not 100, we need to adjust our understanding of what the effect is. First, is there an effect? Or how strong is the effect? So rather than seeing success or fail, we need to look at this as a scale of what is our belief regarding this? What's our understanding about this? And it's a bit like you evaluate vaccinations, So it's not going to be 100%, cure for the entire society. There is a ratio. And then we update our understanding whether there's new variants or there's new treatments or if there's a new population. Every time we need to make the adjustments. I study judgment and decision making, so I really care about how we evaluate evidence. And it's difficult to evaluate evidence which is not 1 or 0. But we have to do this, and we haven't been doing this. So this is exactly the kind of question that we need to ask ourselves, and we need more people working on this. So if this is interesting to you or somebody that you know, we want people to think about this more. To ask.
I was wondering something similar to what he said.
Yes.
And How do you make sure that the information is secure? If so many people are involved in this.
Mhm.
Do you think that the fact that people help also is good? Therefore,
So just so we clarify, when you say secure, what do you mean by secure?
I mean that the information is reliable. So
Yeah.
do you think that's because the people are taking part in it?
Yeah.
Helps
Yeah.
even more?
Yeah.
It sounds like it.
Right. So the more eyes, the more people who are looking at data and again and again analyzing and checking, the more trustworthy it is to me.
Okay.
So my assumption is, if I make things open and I put it out there, and other people who are interested in this and will follow up on this will also check what it is that I do. So first of all, I am going to be a little bit more scared that I am making a mistake. So I will do more checks. Maybe I will ask other people to do checks. Plus, the community can help find all kinds of errors. The more that you have people looking at this, the better it's going to be. Problem is, we pay a lot of money to publishers. Actually, publishers make billions of dollars on our expense, but they add very little. What I would have expected from a publisher when we submit to the journal, the very least, is to check the analysis, right? They don't do this. They give this to other academics to check what it is, but nobody really checks because we're all very, very busy. So the new journals, what the new journals are doing, for example, Meta-Psychology is a new journal, completely no fee, open access, what we call the diamond open access. One of the first stages that they have is looking at the code, rerunning the code, doing checks on the code. So now we know that we must do this. Another direction is that we're trying, a bit like with my check me, replicate me. We now know that when we ask for a budget, we ask for a budget not only for data collection, not only for the scanner, not only for a research assistant, but we also ask for red teams. What is a red team? It's a bit like when you do code, Linux, for example, or you write a firewall or whatever that is completely open source. You want to know whether this works or not. So for example, if you're a Microsoft, IBM, whatever company, you have a hackathon where you're saying, if hackers are able to penetrate my server, I will pay you $1 million. We need to do the same thing about our code. We write this in R, we write this in whatever your language you're using, and we need to say, we're making mistakes. We want to know that this is the best that we can do. Please come and attack me, and I will give you financial rewards for finding this. So inviting red teams in order to look at this. So first, having as many people as possible from this community to be able to assess this. But this is not enough because sometimes it might take years for somebody to look at this. But you also need to incentivize doing this. In addition, we only publish things that are novel, complete manuscripts. We need to start publishing and giving credit to people who are replicating, to people who are doing assessments, to people who are doing red teams. So we need to find a way in the system to incentivize this kind of research. So let's say that you're very interested in finding errors, then you need to be able to do this. We have some people in the open science community who are doing this, and for no reward whatsoever. So one of the amazing examples, you should go and look at her up. She received an award last year, but after many years of struggling, is Elizabeth Bick, who has an amazing ability to detect with her eyes whether images seem wrong, whether there's duplication or something seems off. So she's done this for hundreds of thousands of articles, and academia rejected her. So she became a freelancer. She has a Patreon account where I support her and other people. We pay her a monthly salary so that she can look at academic articles and detect with her eyes whether there's, and then she goes to the journals and say, there's an error here, there's duplication, there's fraud, please. So we need more Elizabeth Bick. We need more people like that. Unfortunately, they are being rejected from the system, but we should, as a community, support them in some other way, like Patreon. I'll just give her a chance as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe this is a long shot,
Yeah.
but we know that science is like foundational for not only, well, like passionate people like here, but also governments and nations development.
Right.
So is there or could we form like, well, maybe it's a like opinion,
Yes.
but a politics organ, like there's a UN organ to check if democracies are being legitimate. Like, could we form an international organ to check science and like get politics involved in being credible and legitimate when we know that governments are investing a lot of money in national organisms that do science?
Yeah, so this is important because it doesn't matter how passionate we might be, we don't have a lot of power. Sometimes you need something to come from top down rather than bottom up, right? So grassroots movements can only do so much. At some point, you need somebody to come from above. So for example, our fight against the publishers, the for-profit publishers, cannot move if we don't get big countries to make a difference. Unfortunately, right now, so the US is very capitalist oriented, so publishers is like, it's gonna, and they have lobbying and all that, so it's difficult to move the Americans. But the European Union really cares about this stuff, especially the Scandinavians and the Dutch, a little bit in the UK, although they're not the European Union anymore, have decided at some point, enough with this for-profit publishers, because you're taking from us again and again. If you want to take once, we can consider, let's negotiate. You want to take multiple times? No more. So right now in Europe, there is a complete revolution that happened. Just as an interesting anecdote, the countries were only able to do this. So what did they decide to do? They said, enough with this paywalls. So if you get money from us, it has to be open access. And even then we control the fees. And you need to show us how in 5 or 10 years, it's not going to cost us anything at all. If you don't do this, we don't pay for the journals. Now, every year, the journals, the publishers told the governments, oh, if you don't pay us, we're going to cut access. You're not going to have any access to all of your journals. And the countries were very afraid of this. And then something remarkable happened. I'm not advocating for this, but it just happened. A Russian hacker decided to take everything that's available out there in the publishers and just make this available. And it's so super, like one click, you have access to everything.
I'm not proud of this, but I teach them the website.
I completely understand. I completely understand, of course.
Right.
We don't have the money to pay $2,000 to access something that we did. Why do I need to pay for something? So it's completely ridiculous, right? But for the first time, people say a lot of things, you know, she can't leave Russia because everywhere that she would go, she would get arrested immediately. So for her, but what she did revolutionized everything, because publishers went to the countries and they said, you know, we're going to cut access. And the countries are like, oh, you're going to cut access. Okay, cut access, that's fine. Like, no, but you don't understand, you won't have access. And the country's like, oh, it's okay. Because they knew that there's an alternative. Nobody can say this out loud, but this created a big difference. And now because of that, the European Union is changing everything with what's called Plan S. And in the future, everything, so in the Netherlands already, they said, if you publish something with a journal, put this on your website, share this as much as you want. If you get sued, we'll protect you. In the Netherlands, it's amazing, it's a revolution. Everything by default is open access. So things are changing over there and they're very powerful. So they're going to change in other places around the world. And hopefully at some point in 10 years, we don't have to pay for the research that we did and you paid for it. Yes.
Yeah. I think a more pessimistic opinion is,
Yes, please.
while this proposal is helped by facilitating replications because they are allowed to be published.
Yeah.
One problem I'm thinking of is about people that are outside of the scientific community. Because let's say a big company wants to sponsor you to do an investigation. They're probably not going to sponsor a replication. They're probably going to try to sponsor something big, something that's revolutionary. And that may incentivize younger, even more experienced scientists to still reach for these innovations and skip these replications because they are not profitable. And in a case, not doesn't make you important in a way.
And so all this comes from a system where how important you are is how novel you are. We're trying to change this equation. For me, this is not how it is. Actually, like if we put novelty versus replication, which is sounded like a bit what you're saying, it's either you're novel or you're replicating. Wait.
Yeah.
I'm making it more extreme, right? I don't know how replicable the novel thing is. If you just come to me with something, it's like, this is groundbreaking. I'm like, terrific, but how do I know that this is going to work everywhere? I actually emphasize, and I would like to hire, work with, build my solutions as a company based on something that's replicable, because I could invest a lot of money. It's very high risk to invest in something that's novel, and I don't know if this is replicable or not. So it's not one or the other. You need in a community people who will do the novel research, and you need people who will do the replication. And the last thing I want to say about this, because it's a big topic and I have a lot to say, we don't just do replications. Everything that we do is a replication and extension. So we build on top of that. But instead of doing from 0 to 100 completely novel, I'm saying, let's use the foundations of the original, do a replication on that, and then extend this by adding something new. The good thing about this is that if something fails, then you know, is it failed because of the novel contribution, or is it failed because the foundations are wrong? So if you do something that's completely novel and doesn't work, it's like, you don't know, is it because of the original research or is it because of you? If you do a replication and extension, it's much better, not only for science, but also for you, because if only the extension failed, you say, oh, the studies in the literature are solid, but I failed. If both of them fail, replication and extension, you're like, maybe the foundations, maybe the literature is not as solid. So we need to move to a combination of first replication, building on top of that, novel research with doing all kinds of extensions. Let's just ask something.
Maybe this is a more naive question.
Yeah.
Do you think, or are you hopeful that we're going to get to the point where every journal has this register report?
Yes, I'm a little bit hesitant. I would like to say immediately yes, but I'm a little bit hesitant because there are many kinds of research. So there's quantitative research, there's qualitative research. My sister is an assistant professor in the humanities. She does all kinds of things, studying all kinds of archives and translating all kinds of languages where p-value doesn't mean anything, power doesn't mean anything. She's doing a different kind of research. So how much is registered reports relevant to what she's doing? I still don't know because I don't understand what she's doing. I can say that for quantitative research, empirical evidence research that uses these kinds of foundations, I really hope registered reports are going to be the standard. For law, for humanities, for philosophy, I don't really know what is the added value of registered reports. And already Chris Chambers, he's not lazy. So once he got registered reports and PCIRR, he also started a bunch of other things. So right now in Cortex, you can actually submit exploratory research. You can do assessment, confirmatory research. So you have different kind of reports depending on what your research question is. If you have so registered reports are good for a confirmation. You have specific predictions, you have a theory and hypothesis, and you want to test those. For those, registered reports are great. If you just want to explore, I have this amazing data set from Argentina, I want to see what happens. There's a different way for you to do this, and you can explore as much as possible. Then there are standards of how to do this. But generally, in all of these domains, including my sister's, we need to improve the way that we're doing things by increasing transparency, sharing as much as possible, and being very clear about what the process is. Yeah? Okay.
I could see this in like basic science, but applied science, I think it would be like a way more hard for, for companies to be able to share their data. Like my brother is working at a train company, and they are having they work with like AI and stuff, and they have like cutting edge technology. And he told me that like we do a lot of science, but we don't publish anything. You know, we sometimes go to a congress that we can't because we don't want the the other companies to steal information.
Yeah.
So how do you think like?
I understand. I, as a taxpayer, don't fund these companies. They're for profit. They should do whatever it is that's good for their stakeholders. I'm just saying, as an academic community where we care about, the foundations of science and the things that we pay for and whatever we care about, things should be different. I just want to say, in terms of data sharing, we work, not me specifically, but me as a community, we work with industry. Sometimes we rely on industry. So I did my PhD in business, not in psychology. And we go to companies and we ask them to share what it is that they've done over there. And sometimes you can't because it's proprietary, because they don't want to share everything. But, or even with patients, confidentiality, you go to all kinds of treatments, you want to protect them. This has been an issue, but we are addressing this. So for example, one thing that you can do to protect identity is to have a data set that is representative of an original data set. So you have the original data that you don't want to expose. You can create, it's called synthetic data set, something that has exactly the same statistical properties as the original. And then you have one person or an authority to say, we've looked at both of these, they are really equivalent. And then if people want to do any kind of analysis, they do this on the synthetic data set.
Yeah.
So there are ways for us to share things, even if there are issues of privacy, confidentiality. So whatever the issue is, we as a community, as open science, we find solutions for that. But we need to raise these issues so that we can get people to think about it.
Would you like some congresses to understand, like asking for?
Sorry?
Would you like congresses asking for these types of reports to submit their
Yeah, of course. I would love for them to participate in all of that. I think it's very relevant for, especially let's say Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca. I want them to use register reports. I want to know that their evidence is solid. I want to be able to look at this evidence, not for them to hide behind, okay, this is confidential. So of course, especially for the things that matter, I want them to open as much as possible. Yeah, of course. Yes, I hope it's okay that I'm keeping you this long. It's like, yeah. Okay, I'm happy to stay as long as you're staying. That's fine. But feel free to leave. That's fine.
For example, when you submit the plan, you add the code of the analysis.
Yeah.
To the plan.
Do you want to see the example? I can show you the example.
We use OSF.
Okay, so let me try and show you an example of the register report that I submitted with my students. Okay, thanks. All right, so here we have the revisiting mental accounting. So I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Thaler. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2017.
Yeah.
And he, sorry? Nudges, exactly, nudges. So one of the things in Nudge is mental accounting. So a good example for mental accounting is, for example, let's say you go to a movie. Imagine two scenarios. In the first scenario, you go to a movie and you get to the cinema, and then you open your wallet and discover that the $10 that you spent to buy the ticket is lost. The question is, will you buy another ticket? And some people say, I already spent $10 on the ticket, I will not buy this. The second scenario is, you go to the cinema, you want to buy a ticket, but when you open your wallet, you see that you lost $10. Will you buy the ticket? And I go like, of course I will buy the ticket because I wanted to sit. So what's the difference? In both cases, you lost $10. But mental accounting is that we say, we allocate $10 to a ticket. Therefore, if we already bought the ticket and the ticket was lost, therefore I cannot invest any longer. So this is mental accounting. So we took 21 problems like this, and we want to see, does this replicate, what is the effect size and all of that. So what you can see over here is we have the PCIRR stage 1. First of all, you can see we have the Qualtrics. So the Qualtrics is our survey. So you can see exactly, you can import this, or you can see all the questions that we have in there. Let me see if I can open this. So you can download, and then if you want to run this, you just go here. You can import this to your projects. So this is what it looks like. So you can see exactly all the. Go back. Yeah, so you can see that we ran a lot of questions, problem 3, problem 4. So you can see that it's randomized. So some of them have between subject design, some of them are within subject design, but you can just like go and have a look. So first of all, we share our Colchicks. So we're saying this is exactly what we're going to run. Another amazing thing about Colchicks is that Colchicks allows you to simulate noise, random data, as if there are some participants. So we export simulated random data, and we write the code to analyze that. So for example, here, you can see, first we do the power analysis in order to see how many participants do we need. And then we have the simulated data set. And then, for example, this student ran everything on Jamovi. Do you know Jamovi?
No.
No. What do you run for your statistics?
So R
is
MATLAB, Python.
Okay, perfect. That's better. Jamovi looks like SPSS, but runs on R. So it's clicks. And the output looks a little bit like that. So you can see the output is kind of nice. But for every problem, she already analyzed the random data set. So the results are completely random. So there shouldn't be any effect in there, right? But after we collect the data, we just plug it to the Jamovi, and then it just runs, right? So we have everything from the Colchicks to the simulated random data set to the code that's supposed to run this pre-registered. So everybody knows exactly what's going to run. What else do I want to show you?
You use it with simulated data, or
Simulated data.
you run a pilot study?
A pilot is a bit more complicated to do. We just simulate data, and I think that's good enough because you want to know that you and the reviewers are aligned on this. The other thing I wanted to show you is that our first manuscript was this. So let's see, for example, I want to show you what that looks like. So the pre-registration plan, the register report, actually looks like a manuscript. So you can see over here that, by the way, contributions. So each one of us, what we did exactly. So it says, so there's no mistakes about who contributed what. With 2 people, maybe not that important, but when you have 100 collaborators, very important. And then you can see the abstract. You can see, I told you about the snapshot, the 6 weeks, you need to do a snapshot. So this is the 1-page snapshot. And then finally, it looks just like a manuscript. So you write all the introduction, you write all the results. These are all the problems that we're running. And then finally, when we get to the methods, and then we're writing method and results, we're writing random data set produced by Colchicks to simulate. So all this is a simulation. You have the participants. So we simulated 200 here. And then the results section, we share the Colchicks and the results. You can see it's very elaborate.
So it's like a pipeline with
It's like a full manuscript. The only thing that's missing is the actual results. And then we update this after the whole thing happened.
Oh, this is the report that you sent before, right?
Yeah, this is what we said. Now, the nice thing about this is that you can also see how we replied to the reviewers. So we also share this. So if I go back, you can also have a look at what was the process.
You also have the corrections too, or?
Yeah, of course, we share everything. So you can see here, for example, how we responded to everything and everything with track changes.
Yeah.
So you can see that in our response, we wrote, for example, a track changes comparison of the previous submission and this submission can be found here. So if I open this, you will see that it will open the 2 PDFs, what we submitted at the beginning and what we submitted at the end. And then we'll put together 2 PDFs, one against the other. So I'll let this work. And then all the changes that we've done. And for each one of the comments made by the reviewers, you can see what it is that we answered.
Yeah.
So everybody can see and assess what was the process that led to the acceptance. And here you can see the comparison of the 2 things. So for example, we changed this from experiments to problems, and then we shifted some stuff around. And then here you can see some of the edits. So the most important thing is that everything is shared, everything is open. Anybody can follow up on this research, can follow and run their own data collection, and can see what it is that we've done. Was the peer review good, not good? We don't know this about what's published, but now when we have the peer community and register reports, everything is shared. So if you want some good examples, these are the two that are already accepted. The other 13 are also kind of similar style. So depending, a lot of examples for you to learn from. Now, if you think me as an undergraduate student, oh my God, I can't do this kind of thing, you can definitely do this, and I can show you how. So in my website, you have ngto.org. Oh, hey, what did I do?
Facebook Messenger.
Okay. So this is my website. If you want to do similar things, you can see there's something called resources and examples. So if we go on this tab to resources and examples, see collaborative open resources that I built together with the team and the students. And one of these is a template for how to do a replication, where we wrote everything for you. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So for example, if you go here, we have a collaborative guide for R Markdown if you're using this, how to do an extension, how to calculate effect size, how to do a power analysis, all kinds of things. If you want to see the template, replication and extension, main manuscript template. So if I double click on this, it opens in a Google Doc. Details all the structures. So all the students in my course use this thing in order to conduct their analysis. And it looks like a manuscript. So it tells you exactly where to put everything, all the author bios, all the information that's needed, how to do the abstract. I even tell them, you know, what is the structure that the abstract needs to be and what needs to be replaced, how to write the background, how to write the choice of study from application. So this makes it much easier, even if you're an undergraduate and you don't know what an article looks like, and you don't know what needs to be reported as a manuscript. This takes away everything that's complicated, because it really, you follow the template and you just fill it up.
Do you have like a latex template for this? Like an overlay one or something like?
I don't, but other people have. Yeah, so I do this because I prefer the Google Doc, where everybody, you can improve this if you want. Other people who already have fixed templates have an overleaf and latex templates for that. We also have this kind of thing for a meta-analysis if you want to do a meta-analysis. We have a lot of these kinds of templates. All of this is open for you to use as much as you want. Just go on the resources tab and see and use this as, you know. And if you have questions on this, or if you see some way to improve this and you want to help us, terrific, go change whatever you want to change, add your name, and when we submit this to your co-author.
Like before I asked on behalf of like neuroscience, but like for all like closed science, not open science. Like what I don't know. It after this, it seems like such a smaller piece of evidence. Like it's not that much, like not that sciencey, like, and just like how for hard sciences like biology, medicine, if those like layering bricks that were so fragile, they got results, like they built stuff, and they built a lot of like good stuff that works. And I think that when you discuss about science in general, just like the main defense for science is, well, it has products up to here and it has worked because we have like good stuff made thanks to science. Like even
I don't want it to sound like I'm saying nothing works in science, because this is not the case. A lot of things do work in science. But we need to know how to know. We need to know how to assess science. So for example, I, with my students and team, do a big project. I said 120 replications in judgment and decision-making. Things like Richard Thaler and mental accounting. Our replication rate is around 70%. So it's no longer 30 to 50, it's no longer like 5 to 10%. So some fields seem to be more transparent, more open, do more replications, and then it's a bit more solid. So first that we need to ask is how to assess. Second of all, let's assess, let's run replications. So if I want to do research in judgment decision making, then I run as many replications as possible, and then I know what is solid and what is not solid. The problem right now is that we don't know. We just need to know more. I'm not saying that nothing works, because obviously things are working. I just want to know to what extent they work. How do I know that they're working? A lot of things we're revisiting. We're revisiting the evidence about antidepressants. We're revisiting all sorts of evidence about how we treat cancer. We're revisiting a lot of things because we know that there's all sorts of incentives from the pharmaceutical companies and the academia. So assessing things allows us to know which evidence is better. But at the beginning, from the start, we need to assess, we need to replicate, and we're not doing this. So if something is working, we need to know what is working and to what extent. I think we're gonna maybe one more question, and then that's the last one.
It's a small one.
Yeah.
A big issue, with research,
Yeah.
as a result of this pressure,
Yeah.
is plagiarism,
Right.
and self-plagiarism as well.
Yeah.
Maybe in the other sciences, as in the humanities, a way in which open science can help,
Yes.
is to help this issue by having, the open access and access to those comments as well. Other people can see that. I think that it's very which you can help.
I agree. So a lot of people are saying, why would I want open science? If I make everything open, everybody can copy from me and steal this from me. My reaction is exactly like your reaction. I actually say, some people are saying, but somebody is going to steal your replication stuff. And what I say in response to this is that everybody knows, because there's a DOI, it's publicly available. Everybody knows when I updated this. So I can show that I was the first, that I'm the original. By sharing more and stamping everything, having DOIs, I actually protect myself against stealing, because otherwise, how would people know that actually I had this idea or these are my materials? Plus, in the academic community, I'm really hoping that we'll move more from a competition, I need to be first, to, oh, you did something interesting, I'm also working on this, let's work together, and then we can collaborate, because we need to help stakeholders, we need to help the general public. So open science helps you with all of that, both credit and collaboration. Thank you so much for staying with me up until now. I'm very grateful. If you want to talk more, thank you.